Normally my voice is strong enough I don't even worry about amplification, but I'm fighting off the possibility of a cold this morning. So you'll excuse me, I'm sure. I got two passages this morning, they sort of work together. The first one is from Matthew in chapter 6, verse 24. This is from the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is preaching to the people. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. And then from Paul's first epistle to Timothy, in the 6th chapter, verses 6 through 10. Of course, there is great gain in godliness combined with contentment, for we brought nothing into the world, so that we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with these. But those who want to be rich fall into temptation, and are trapped by many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, and in their eagerness to be rich, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Of all the people in the world, I sometimes think that we Americans are in most danger from passages like this and from trying to have it both ways. We tend to think that we can be godly, we can be good, we can be ethical, we can be right and loving and kind and give away a lot of money, but also want to get rich and desire money and do whatever we have to make good money. And we presume that there's nothing wrong with doing whatever we can to make good money. But I worry about us that way. Does anyone here remember who Andrew Carnegie was? Or John D. Rockefeller? Some of you have had history classes. Both of these men in the second half of the 1800s got very, very rich. Mr. Rockefeller in the oil business and Mr. Carnegie in the steel business. And both of them, at the end of their lives, set up great foundations with the large amounts of money they made. Millions and millions. Almost $1 billion each. And $1 billion in 1890 was the equivalent of $100 billion today in control of businesses and in purchasing power. They set up these great corporations to give money away. And they were churchmen, serious churchmen. Andrew Carnegie was an elder in the Presbyterian Church. John D. Rockefeller was a deacon in the Baptist churches. And in the Baptist churches, the deacons are the same thing as elders. They're the lay people who sit on the board to make decisions about what the church shall be. But both of these men made their money according to the rules of business. And the rules of business were pretty cutthroat in those days. And both of them did things that we would probably think of as wicked. Mr. Carnegie used his relationship with the governor of Pennsylvania to have the National Guard come and break a strike at one of his steel mills and shoot strikers. Killed some of them dead. Mr. Rockefeller negotiated deals with the railroads so that they would charge every other company more money to transport their oil than they charged to transport his. And he would set up businesses in such a way as to run his competitors almost broke, doing anything he could, including things that were, even in those days, illegal, and then buy those businesses up so that he controlled everything. They thought that it was possible to have it both ways. to be a faithful, godly, believing Christian, but also to pursue wealth according to the rules of money. So we hear this phrase from Paul, the love of money is at the root of many evils. Indeed, the King James and the form in which the thing is passed into our language is, the love of money is at the root of all evil. And I want us to think about that this morning. Jesus has more to say in his preaching. I mean, if you open up your Bible and go through it and just start noting passages and putting tick marks in columns, Jesus has way more to say about money than he has to say about sex. He has almost as much to say about money as he has to say about practicing our religion. Jesus cares about money because so often that's where our hearts are. And the way we treat money and think about money and use money is something that betrays where we've put our treasure, as I was talking about last week. Now note that money, if we think about it, is not immediately valuable in and of itself. It symbolizes the value of other things, of houses and clothes and food. And most importantly, it symbolizes the value of the work and the services of other people. And all of these things are directly and immediately valuable. Houses, clothes, food, legal advice, medical treatment, art, teaching, all these things are of immediate and obvious use. And money is merely an image of their value. And I think this is the first key to understanding the problem with the love of money. There's no necessary harm in itself in loving things of value. The Old Testament is full of passages where God blesses his people with great wealth. But in those passages, the wealth is identified as sheep and goats and tents and servants. Not so much as money. It's identified as the things themselves that are of value. And it's all right to desire and work for them, and even to grant them a share of our love. It's part of the blessing that was given to us when the earth was made for us and made to provide our needs, and we were made to be the stewards of the earth. But because money is only the image of the value of these things, to love the image rather than the thing itself is a form of neglect of the thing itself, and it's a form of idolatry. An idol is an image. The word idol actually means image, model, statue sometimes. To love the image or the statue or the model of things rather than the things themselves puts us in danger of worshiping them. And worshiping money, of course, is obviously puts us in danger of the second commandment, where God says that we should worship only him. But it's not because money is evil in and of itself, but because loving it is breaking the first and second commandments. Now, it may seem obvious when I put it this way, but it's not always so obvious when we're actually busy living our lives. Because after all, if you got $50,000 in the bank, and hopefully someday you will, and a good job so that you can afford a $300,000 mortgage, well then you can buy a pretty nice house. And the house will shelter you, and comfort you and your family, and be a place where you and your friends will gather, and those are good and wonderful things, but we tend to make the mistake of thinking that it is the money that gets us this house. And none of us think that we're going to get a nice house like that just by sitting down and praying to God. We're pretty sure we're also going to have to earn the money and use it. And in doing this, I think we fall into error, because we can't make a house out of $20 bills. It's made of wood and steel and tar paper and copper and 100 other things. And it is God who made the trees and the iron ore in the ground and the copper. It is God who made us, human beings, with hands that are capable of skill, capable of carpentry and machinery, capable of thinking. After all, there is no steel in the ground, it's just iron ore. And if we hadn't thought about it and worked and experimented with it, we never would have been able to turn iron ore into steel. The value of money is parasitic. It gets its value from the things that it represents. And those things come to us ultimately from God. God is the one who made all these things in the world, and God knew that they would be useful and valuable to us. But the ultimate sources of things often feel very distant, very far away. And the immediate source of these things is the ability to take our own wallets and pay for them. A lot of the good things that we think of depend upon other people and their work and the honesty of their work and the skill of their work. We have to count upon what other people do in order to turn these things into value. So, I want us to understand that about money, but I also want us to turn around and look at it the other way, because I don't want us to fall into the opposite error. Because even though I've said these things, there's not necessarily any good reason to despise money. Now, one of the hardest things about being a preacher is that sometimes you have to speak about things and teach about things that you yourself are not very good at. And I want to talk now about the goodness of money and how we can find the goodness of money and do things with it. But I myself have always had a very hard time with money. So many people for such a long time have done so many unjust things to get money, or been selfish and done unjust things with it, or worked hard at taking it away from others, that I often have a very hard time seeing and understanding the goodness of money. And at times I've hated money. And in disputes over money, I'm sometimes tempted to give in, to throw money in the face of the people with whom I'm disputing. I'm so disgusted, and I'm so afraid, and I'm so unhappy about being trapped in a position of having to fight for money. And in doing that, I sin in the other direction. Our faith, our Christian faith, is all about God's gracious redemption. And redemption means buying something back or making something good again. It's not just one of those magical religious words. And it means restoring to goodness things that have gone bad. Just like in our song, when we've gone bad, Jesus undoes that and restores us. But it also goes for the rest of the world and the things in the world, because they were made for us and to be part of our lives. And making us new creatures in Christ and restoring us to goodness when we've rebelled against Him also puts us in the position of sharing in the work of redemption. And that means that when something has been abused or misused or turned into an instrument of sin, the right response is not necessarily to abandon it or destroy it or throw it away, but rather to redeem it. And who of all people is going to understand how to redeem things if not we who have been redeemed from Christ? So I think we need to figure out how to separate money from its evil misuse and do something right and good with it, and honor the God who made all things, the things that give money its real value. So what I want to ask is good about money before it goes bad, before it's misused. before people make it into an instrument of sin. What's the true and right and proper goodness of money? So let's remember what money is. It's a symbol of the value of other things. And as such, it doesn't have a lot of value in itself. It represents the value of other things. But it does have one value that belongs to it all on its own, and that is that it is a medium of exchange. Money enables us to give to one another the fruits of our labor, the houses we build, the programs we write, the machines that we work on, the talents we've developed. Money is a medium of exchange. And exchange means giving back and forth. Cleansed of the greed with which people take it from one another, cleansed of the selfishness with which people spend it on themselves or on foolishness, cleansed of the injustice with which people use it to oppress others. This is what money is and can be. It's an instrument for sharing our lives with other people. And that's its right and proper use. And that's a purpose which is godly as well. Now, Jesus tells us that we're supposed to be as wise as serpents as well as gentle as doves. And most people around us do not recognize what the purified goodness of money could be. And they would gladly take our money from us on the grounds that if we don't know enough to hold on to it, then we don't have any right to it. So we have to be wise enough to recognize this attitude when you encounter it and insist upon justice rather than permitting such people to commit injustice over money against us or others. But we also must be the people who redeem money, who make it good again. That means that when we exchange it with other people, we should say to ourselves not, I'm giving him good money, he owes me good work, and that's that. It's an even exchange, that's all. We should say to ourselves, this person is giving me something, and I am giving them something as well. And unfortunately, they can't use a computer program. They need groceries. And unfortunately, I can't use maybe what they make. But I need new clothes. So we use money to give to one another. We need to form the attitude in all of our ordinary transactions, buying and selling, but also, very importantly, earning and paying for work, that we are really and truly giving our time and our effort and our skill to one another. It is a gift we are giving one another, and money is just an instrument we use to help balance this gift and to help make it more convenient. So I am never particularly upset about paying for things of actual value that have been built by people exercising skill and diligence and using their knowledge and ability. I do worry sometimes about the way money is made in the world of finance, because sometimes it seems like nothing is being made or given to anyone else when someone places a financial bet on the value of these mortgages and sells them to someone else. And the truth of the matter is, no one's going to make any money unless someone else loses it. And when someone buys stock futures or sells stock futures, they're placing a bet. And no one will make any money on that unless someone else loses it. And no one's making anything new when they do that. Those things are being made anyway. This is also why we Christians tend to object to gambling. Someone once said, when you sit down to play poker, if you're not there to cut the other guy's heart out and eat it, then you shouldn't be playing. Because a gambling game like that is about taking the other person's money, and there's no other way around it. And that's not redeeming the money. So I don't much object to a man getting rich because he builds steel mills. But I object to him using people to break strikes and to shoot strikers. I don't much object to a man getting rich because he builds new kinds of computers and I use them at home. But I object to the kind of crap that was pulled in the financial markets in the period between 1989 and 2008 that finally resulted in a lot of us losing a lot of money because it was all a complex series of financial bets. Money is a tool, and it's a tool that can be used for many things. But we should be the people who understand and communicate to others that it's a tool for giving ourselves to one another, giving our time and our work to one another. So first, that's an attitude we should have in buying and selling. Second, it's an attitude that we should have in working and paying for work. And third, it's an attitude that we protect and an attitude that we encourage in ourselves and an attitude that we build when we're not having it, when we give it away for charitable purposes. Giving it away to the widow and the orphan who need it, oftentimes through the church, is a way to build that attitude into ourselves by making ourselves do something specific that will create a new way of thinking about the money. And I've talked about the widow and the orphan before, and I'm not going to talk more about it now. One of the conveniences of our form of government here in the United States is the way that it makes room for the church. And oftentimes we're able to put our money together in the church to accomplish jobs that it couldn't accomplish if we had to do it all by ourselves. We're going to have a coffee house in about 4 weeks now. And one of our goals in that coffee house is to raise money to send to school a man, I think in Uganda, that Mike Wu, one of our members, met and knows will be able to do good things for other people if he can only go to college and get a degree. But money is hard to come by there. And I don't know how much it costs you to get a degree, for sure, but I'll bet you it's at least $15,000 a year for 4 years. But in Uganda, this man can get a degree in 2 years for a total of between $6,000 and $8,000. A much easier way to use our money to do some good. I'm hoping that we'll take that chance pretty seriously 4 weeks from now. We hope to raise about $1,200. For our challenge this week, though, what I want us to do is every day when we pray, and I've talked with y'all and I know that almost all of you try to pray some every day. Every day this week when you pray, try to think of and stop and write down at least one thing you've done to redeem money, to make it better, to turn it into a tool for sharing among people. Try to think of something and write something down every day, which means I'll be perfectly happy if you come up with 3 or 4 things in a week. And bring them to worship next week. We'll share them during our prayer time. We're the people who should know, because we deny it our worship, what the goodness of money really is. Because the people who care only about getting rich don't know what the goodness of money really is. Amen.